Good morning. How is everyone today? Everyone's fabulous? Okay, sorry, that wasn't good enough. Everyone's fabulous? Yes, lovely, great to hear. So first off, I'd like to get to know who's here today. So who is here that lives in a community that is north of Calgary? Hands up, fabulous. Now who's here that lives in a community east of Calgary? Tremendous. And west of Calgary? Fabulous. Okay, kind of somewhere in the middle. I like it. And what about south of Calgary? Woohoo, great presence. Now, who lives in the city of Calgary? Wonderful. What a great mix today, and it's an absolute honor to be able to share with you today some information and some stories. So I do want to share with you a little bit about who I am, because that's important too for you to understand, well, who is this lady that's standing in the room that came from northern Alberta? Well, first off, I want to say I'm a mom. I have 4 beautiful children, 3 boys, 1 girl, and guess what one of my sons, my oldest son, gave me? Anyone in the room understand what he might have given me? Yeah, a granddaughter, the best thing in the world. And you know, when people said to me years back, you should definitely have grandbabies first, they're bang on. Love it. Her and I giggle, we chat, we get to do lots of great things together. She's just turning 3, and when her head starts to spin, I just give her back. Woohoo, it's awesome. So I was raised very differently, and belonging is important to me for that. I was born in the 60s by an unwed mother, and she didn't have the capacity to look after me. So I was fortunate to be able to be part of a community called Didsbury. Who's here from Didsbury? I know there's someone in the room. Beautiful community. So I spent my younger years with my grandparents, and they had 12 children, and I was lucky number 13. Yes! So I had the blessing of being on the farm and growing up with some amazing people till I was about the age of 5. And then I floated back and forth a little bit, and then at the age of 8, I was adopted. And it was a pretty exciting time when my parents married and my stepfather adopted me to be his baby. And that was cool. I was 8, but I was still his baby. So it was a neat experience. But as you can see, I'm 6 feet tall, and 6 feet tall since I was 12. You got it. I weighed less than 100 pounds. It was fun. Let me tell you, it was lots of fun. So I had some experiences of being talked to, being called a few different things, and I didn't know if I belonged. And so that started my passion on this journey, because I knew what it felt like. And I knew some of the hurt, and I knew some of the culture and the baggage that I developed with it. So I'm going to share with you today, you know, as you've heard already and you've seen on the tables, I'm going to share with you about the sense of belonging and the importance of it. I am going to dive deep into statistics, and there's a reason for that. Statistics tell us the story. So I'm going to tell you some stories on statistics, and I'm also going to tell you about also the voices of citizens. And I'm going to tie them together and create some stories for you today. That's important for you to understand, because it's when you take both and you connect them together, it helps you to understand the platform from your communities and what you're working in. So you'll see on the slides, hopefully that I am from the Community Foundation Northwestern Alberta. Our organization serves all of northwestern Alberta, from Grand Prairie, Grand Cache, Peace River, all the way up on the western side. We don't service the other side in regards to Fort McMurray. That's another foundation. Our goal as foundations are to build strong communities, and I have 182 colleagues across Canada that are doing the same. And you are fortunate that following my session, you're going to meet Tim Fox from the Calgary Foundation. So 2 great opportunities for you today to experience 2 different messages. But again, our focus is building strong communities, and we do it in a variety of ways. We do it through as a funder. We also help donors and individuals give back. And most importantly, through our leadership, and that's what today's about. In our leadership capacity, what we do is we have a project. Oops, I'm pointing in the wrong direction. I got to remember here. What we do across our nation is we produce a report called Vital Signs, and that's what's on your table. Vital Signs is a report, again, that we pull data from national, provincial, community level. We also work with individual organizations on the ground as well. So that's one component. The other component is we reach out and we have a very in-depth survey that goes out to communities. So when we launched our report, the one you have in front of you, in October of 17, we also launched with 38 other community foundations across Canada and 80 across the world. So when you think about that, 80 other communities are also looking at the vitality of their communities outside of our Canadian perspective as well. So it's a big project, and it's a really important project. This project is to help to shift change. It's helped to shift communities, help to give knowledge, give resources, and help to bring people together to look at opportunities. But why did we start this project? Back in 2000, the City of Toronto was going through amalgamations and annexation. And at that time, they knew as a municipality, they were not the right body to go out and reach out and understand their community. So they engaged the Toronto Community Foundation. This was new to the Toronto Foundation. Community foundations are neutral. We're the charity for charities. They said, you need to help us with this. And the Toronto Community Foundation entered into an agreement, said, yes, let's make it happen. So as a result, they started the project that again provides a community checkup. It's like a community report card to understand strengths and weaknesses. And it helped back in 2000 to make shifts and changes within their community. And I'm not going to talk today, but if you get a chance, just research the Toronto Community Foundation Vital Signs. They've got some amazing stories of what they've done around bringing the sense of belonging and community together. So let's talk about what is community. Each of us live in different communities, but communities is truly where a group of us, that we come together and we're working to share, whoops, wrong, I'm learning the clicker today, apologize. We're living in the same area and sharing a common attitude, interest, and goals. And I say that because we bring community groups together because they share a common interest and goals. I'm a Rotarian. Other Rotarians in the room? Oh, fabulous, great to see. I'm wearing my peace pin today. So, as Rotarians, we have a community. You have community. I was chatting with Dwight. He has his community around his library and in Muir, etc. We have numerous communities within communities. But again, it's where people come together and they're sharing that common interest. Now, many of you would have heard of Doug Griffiths, former MLA from the Battle River Wainwright area. And he talks about for a community to be successful, it's important today, but also for our future. And it's important that all of us enjoy the quality of life. All of us as in the room today and in our families and also within the communities we're involved in. Because a big note is we become a reflection of our community. So think about when you're involved in things, you are a reflection of that community. I'm a reflection of Rotary, very, very much. And I'm also a reflection of my work through the Community Foundation. So in our daily lives, we enter into a variety of communities it could be the cultural groups we're involved with, it could be the church groups we're involved with, it could also well be our service groups, or maybe it also could be as well looking at our sports and rec opportunities. But I cannot say enough that it takes all levels from government, citizens, groups, and communities to help build an inclusive and strong community. All of us have a responsibility, and all of us have the opportunity to help and shift change. And why would we want to do that? Well, because we know that citizens are saying that's what they're asking for. So when research has shown that when we have strong communities and people feel that they belong within their communities, if it's their sense of community in their neighborhood or their sense of community within their cultural group, we know we're healthier. And we all want to be healthier. I want to be healthier. I strive for that. We also know our neighborhoods are safer. We also know that people will give more time and they'll give more money as well, and to support their community that they're proud of. We also know that social inclusion improves. That's key. Think about social inclusion as well. We also will be more resilient when we face community emergencies. And we witnessed that both with the town of Slave Lake fire and also the Fort McMurray fire. We saw the resilience of our communities. We saw the resilience of people coming together. That was a sense of community that made that happen. So there's some things, though, that we need to talk about regarding to get to here, is that we know that not everyone feels that they belong. And not everyone feels included. So imagine you were going to your doctor's office the very first time. You walked up to the doctor's reception's office desk and you announce your name, and she gives you a piece of paper, says, here, fill this out. How do you feel? It wasn't a welcome. She's doing her job. She's giving you this paper. It happens. How do we feel when we receive that? Well, the sense of belonging is a two-way street. It's how we feel, but it's also how we welcome people. And that's a piece that I really encourage you to think about, is how we welcome people. Because you imagine if over time, if people feel that sense of isolation, imagine what that means for them and that culture they've developed within their lives. They will continue to feel that in all sectors. So it may happen at the doctor's office, could happen at the bus station when they're also boarding the transit bus as well. I make a point myself to smile and say hi to everyone. And you should see the changes on people's faces when they get a chance to get a smile back. It's absolutely enlightening, and I just feel so honored to be able to give someone a smile, because they feel included with me and I feel included with them. So why did I tell you all this? Well, I'm going to give you some stats. And the stats are what are the important part here. And again, as I said to you earlier, that's what we do. We look at the stats, and then we look at what we can do to shift change following that. So the top 3 things that Canadians say that makes a good community and a good place to live. First is affordability at 40%. Second is public safety at 38%. And employment opportunities at 36%. So alone, we don't make up a community, all of these areas don't make up a community, but when you weave those 3 areas together, that's what builds a strong community. So weave affordability, weave public safety, and employment options. So, as I mentioned earlier, belonging is a two-way street. And again, it's acceptance and inclusion. So, and belonging will build stronger communities. When we know we belong and we feel that we're included, it also, again, builds safer communities, vibrant communities, and it also brings purpose to people's lives. Because then they feel better to contribute, feel better as their families, they're healthier, talk about the crime rates, etc., go down. So, did you know, when immigrants come to a new country, they usually get involved first with their cultural organization, and then next, they'll look at what opportunities there are to get their children involved in sports. And the reason for that is they develop friendships. They like to be healthy, they develop friendships, they want to be active, and their children develop friendships as well. So what a great opportunity when we think about parks and recs and, part of the subject of what we're here today for. We also know that when we belong, that we'll volunteer more. Again, we'll coach our children's teams, etc. It was interesting because on Tuesday when we were in Edmonton, I had a young lady speak to me about that. And her husband's with the RCMP, and when they move around from community to community, they've built a culture that they stay close within their RCMP community. And she said, we finally are reaching out and we're coaching our children's hockey teams and we're coaching our daughter's soccer team. So they're reaching out. So it's a two-way street again. They had a culture and a community built, and they're looking at ways they can expand upon that. So I really appreciated her testimony and her story around. So again, research shows that 38% of our Canadians don't have a stake in their community, though. 38%. And 50% of Canadians think that being involved in community events or activities is not very important to them. So that's significant when you think about what that represents. That's half the room. It's cut the room in half here. So we know that if we can increase interaction among people in our communities, that will also increase that sense of belonging. So when we can welcome newcomers and help them in regards to getting involved with sporting activities or welcoming their cultural groups, we've got great opportunities. So one of the things too that we've highlighted in this report is you'll also notice around, and the reason I asked about where you're from is, are you rural or are you from the Calgary area? Well, what we're seeing right now is the sense of belonging is higher in communities that are predominantly rural. And part of that, again, is the barn building. We've all, growing up in Didsbury, we were out at the hall quite a bit. Those were our family community events were held. I was married at one of the halls just outside from our home, from Didsbury on the Blind Line on the Correction Trail. So, that sense of belonging starts with that barn building and that community coming together. And people are asking for that. So where we live, and what I'm talking about here is home. Home has changed. Home isn't that place where we were raised. Home is different today. Home is also that more than half of Canadians no longer live where they grew up. So you think about in this room, how many of you grew up in the community that you live today? Or how many of you are? Fabulous. So, that's a shift from what we've seen in the past. And part of that shift is for employment, economic opportunities, marriages, families, etc. But we're also seeing that housing is less affordable in major cities. And so what this is creating is also a sense of isolation, because they may not be able to live where they need to. Just an example around housing in our community. In last year, 82% of the youth that used our youth shelter were experiencing either parent-teen conflict, were homeless, or had mental health disorders. And we've shown through our research that the supports they were receiving through the shelter helped to shift them from that isolation into community and community belonging. So it's not just having housing, but it's also the supports that we offer to ensure that those housing mechanisms are strong and can be supportive for the circumstances. We also, in our Housing First program in Grand Prairie, saw a decrease of 40% in our emergency medical services demands. That's significant for our homeless population. And we saw a 60% drop in our emergency room use by those individuals. And what we're seeing is that children of those families are becoming more settled, and we're also seeing a focus on employment and stability for those families. So it's interesting when you analyze that and you look at what housing represents from what it used to be and what it is today. Well, okay, sorry, I don't know, I thought I hit it once, but if I could have my great tech team help me out again there. We're at public spaces. Okay, this is a really important piece for many of us in the room, but shared spaces and public places like libraries, parks, festivals have become the thread of our social fabric. They're what are connecting people and what people are desiring to have. So when you look at the research has shown that access to natural environmental areas like parks, etc., in our communities improves the quality of life for all, particularly for our newcomers, for our children and our seniors, and for all sectors of community, but specifically newcomers and seniors and children. So when we think about that, how are we making sure that we have accessibility for all and inclusion for all in all of those areas? Our community citizens, when we conducted the survey, said parks and rec and environmental places is first priority for them. That is important. So when I look at that, I go, how do we ensure we continue to expand upon that? Because we also know that increases health, it decreases obesity rates, etc. There's so many gifts with it. People connect on the trails or in those areas as well. So going forward though, another area, and Dwight, this is as I was mentioning to you earlier, across Canada, the public library usage has been on the rise. 41% of Canadians are active library card holders. I just don't want to mess up the numbers, that's why I'm looking at my notes. But 41% of Canadians are currently card holders. We know today we have 3,598 public libraries in Canada. Those libraries are reporting 360 million visits annually. That's tremendous. And you think back, we collectively got together in the past in libraries, and then we moved away. And libraries now, again, are that hub where people are meeting and connecting. Even with the use of electronic books, etc., people are visiting libraries. Absolutely exciting to see. So I mentioned earlier about having inclusive parks. So this is an example of a park that was created in Grand Prairie, and it was created as a result of a neighborhood association that came together and identified the lack of an inclusive park, an inclusive for all. This park is made as a result of these individuals to ensure that it encourages everyone to participate. So accessibility is as a result of the installed artificial turf, paved pathways, and wheelchair ramps. It was the first one in Grand Prairie. The organization, the neighborhood organization that fundraised, did amazing of pulling this together very quickly. And as a result, it is the hub in our community as an inclusive park for anyone to access. So when you drive by this park, you'll see amazing individuals from our seniors, our youth, with all abilities and disabilities utilizing. So it's bringing their community together, and it was an opportunity for our community citizens to get to know each other. So neighborhood associations are something we're seeing definitely on the increase and growing within our environments. And it's wonderful to see, because what we are hearing from on the ground from our neighborhood association members is that they're building a sense of trust with their neighbors, because they're meeting in the parks, they're collectively coming together, working again for something that's important to them. But it's a little more also than just sharing eggs and milk. What they're doing is they're building a sense of trust. They're building a sense of family. And that sense of family is a strong conduit to help them maintain and feel included in that community. And when I say that, I say it because Grand Prairie has a very high migration rate. And we see lots of people coming into our community and they say, we're coming for 1 or 2 years. We want them to stay. You want them to stay. And so we look at the opportunities of that connection, of them building family, because it's a new definition of family, so they can be together and support each other. So when something happens, this is something I didn't mention on Tuesday, but when I first moved to Grand Prairie, a few years after, our 12-year-old was diagnosed with leukemia. And when he was diagnosed, I really wasn't involved in the community to a whole bunch. And I say a whole bunch to very generally. But I had to travel 5.5 hours down to Edmonton, and we traveled there for 3.5 years for treatment. Back in Grand Prairie, it was the people that came together. I was a single mom at the time. And they supported my children that I needed to leave so I could help to ensure my other child survived. And let me tell you, without that community, I wouldn't be who I am today. And that's the value of what community represents. And that was during a crisis that they came together and they supported me. And honestly, that's why I'm in the job I am today, as I really believe in what it represents. So when we talk about also our neighborhood associations, one of the things I encourage, if you have the opportunity to influence policy, do so. Really think about how we can be more nimble and have better opportunities. Poor language, my dad's up there looking at me right now, and I know there's an English teacher in the room, but I say it very wholeheartedly. The more that we can help to be nimble, the more opportunities we have to help those individuals that are on the ground in these neighborhood associations or these collective groups to make change. We've just recently announced in Grand Prairie that we have our very first community garden as a result of a relationship with our municipality and with our public school board. And it's in an inner city school area, and this garden is going to be life-changing for that community and that school. So think about ways that we can also help to nudge along and have a voice and be advocates for change. So you heard me talk at the very beginning about the statistics in Canada about employment, the importance of employment for our citizens. Well, inclusion in our employment areas is also just as important. We know that we spend more time in our day usually at work than we do sometimes with our families. And so imagine if someone's coming to work and they don't have healthy meals or they don't have transportation that gets them there effectively. Sometimes they feel really excluded then, and sometimes they won't share. So we have opportunities to look at ways that we can be more inclusive within our workplaces as well. Because when you think about 8 hours a day or longer, those are our support mechanisms, and that does become a type of family as well. And so we know as well that poverty also creates other barriers. We have nearly 1 in 5 children right now living in poverty in Canada. That's a high statistic for a very, very wealthy country and for a very prosperous country. So think about what that represents in your own communities. We know that also poverty has more than just a personal cost to those families and to those children. In 2016, we did an analysis of the cost of poverty to our community in Grande Prairie, just the city, the 68,000 people just in Grande Prairie, not the 225 we service. That cost is $84.4 million a year when you consider healthcare, taxes, etc. So that's significant. Poverty impacts all of us, economic aspect, school aspect, in all areas. So as we go forward, I really challenge you to look at ways that we can be more inclusive and more supportive to help to lower those numbers. Because what we're reflecting in Grande Prairie, you're going to be reflecting numbers as well in your communities. So another piece that was also quite interesting when we went into the study was in regards to youth under 30 and volunteering. Volunteering has shifted and changed, specifically for our millennials that are under 30 years of age. Lack of time is a concern, so how do we be more flexible? Another piece is that they're looking for ways to develop professional skills. So as we are recruiting and looking at ways of involving our millennials and our younger people, how are we, again, two-way street, how are we looking at what their desires and needs are as well as our own? Because a lot of times we'll go forward and say, I need this, I need a social media person, or I need a writer, or I need a volunteer to sell tickets. But how do we also go both ways? Again, with that sense of belonging. Another concern we have is we're seeing in Canada a growing gap between the rich and the poor. And in Grande Prairie, we are seeing an increase in travel. We're seeing an increase at our airport. My office is right on a main bypass where the large trucks go by every day, hauling trucks from everything from lumber to oil and gas, service trucks, and it's busy. We're reporting a higher number of permits are being issued, but there's also a cost with that too as well. And the cost of that is looking at food security. And how do we ensure that as the economy shifts and changes, that we can also have good, healthy food? We know in Alberta, 1 in 10 children, or not children, 1 in 10 people live in food insecurity. So 1 in 10, when I talked about maybe having food to come to work with, healthy food for lunches, 1 in 10 don't have enough in their cupboards that meets food security standards. So again, how are we creating more edible gardens? As I mentioned, we have one that's being created in Grande Prairie. So how do we be more flexible? How do we find ways to change upon that? So we need to look at ways. How do we, instead of growing the gap between the rich and the poor, how do we shorten that gap? And I'm going to give you a quote from my colleague Martin at the Edmonton Foundation. And I think it fits so well, especially for today. Our community is pretty good at helping people live better in poverty. What we haven't been very good at is assisting people to get out of poverty. Community economic development provides people with low incomes the tools to increase their income and their assets and therefore become more independent. So I leave that for, as a thought for you as well. So again, sense of belonging and being part of community. Well, I can tell you that overall, our alliance and our allegiance to our country is strong. We are well over 90%. We support our country, and I think the Canada 150 helped us immense to recognize the gifts that we have. But that sense of community to our country isn't as high in our own communities. So we don't have that dedication and that strength as well within our own communities. So building inclusive communities is important because generally people feel Canada is first. So something for us to think about. Again, these are statistics. I don't make this up. These are statistics. This is the story about it. So one of the other items was around our candidates that are running for office. One of the things that people value that they have a right to vote, but we also have a large gap in getting to know who the candidates are. And if you think about that, social media, majority will see lots of talk on social media. Talk is great on social media, but it doesn't give people a chance to get to know the individuals. And people are asking for that, and there are opportunities to get to know so they can vote to what they feel is appropriate for them. So, let's see if I can do this without... Safety. Another item that I mentioned that is an item very important for Canadians. Well, Canadian research is telling us that, yes, again, we want to have strong communities and we want a safe community. And public safety is, again, one of the second most important items. But from a Canadian perspective, there's a disconnect between perception and reality. So in reality, we have less crime than we had 10 to 20 years ago. Yet 90% of Canadians feel that crime is increasing or it's worsening. So it's a perception versus the reality. And again, that's something we have to really think about, and we need to have some conversations around. We do know, though, that there's a number of factors that also influence crime rates, including that is when municipalities take strategic initiatives and partnerships to help to bond together and look at ways of decreasing crime. And we've seen that in Northern Alberta with our 3 municipalities coming together and approaching it on a global aspect versus independently. So through our discussions with individuals from the justice system, what we have found, though, is crime is a response to the economy. So we know we have more officers right now on the ground, but we also know as the economy starts to improve in Alberta, that we also may see the increase of crime. So there's many variables, and it's very complex, but it is a concern for our citizens, and so it's something we need to also talk about. So families, again, I've talked earlier about the definition of families has changed. It's about the people we're surrounded with, the people in our neighborhoods, etc., and the people that support us. Well, family and friends are very, very much of what we've been told through our reports and through our studies is number one. So 64% of Canadian millennials believe family is whoever you surround yourself with. So again, it's that shift into the younger generation as well. But something that's interesting when we talk about families is parents and parenting. 76% of parents worry that they're not being the best parent that they could be. So how can we help and support, and specifically lone parents? And I know there's a lot of outside influence that happens in parenting, and I'm testimonial of that as well. I just give her back, as I say now. But again, you know, there's that influence of being, how do we help our lone parents and our parents today? So what we do know is that parents they are better parents when they live in communities where they're connected and where they feel that they've got someone to help them with childcare or support or etc. So when we have that opportunity to branch and strengthen that relationship, what we're doing is we're creating a strength of bonding, and we're helping them to be successful within their environments and their children. And it's no different than a forest. What do we see in forests? We have trees. We don't have one tree, but we have trees that are connected. They're rooted at the ground level in their roots. They support each other. We have winds that come in. We sway back and forth, but we stay together. We have bumps. We have curves. And somebody may cut down a tree, and that's pretty devastating for the rest of the forest. But the forest is there to support each other. And when we look at the sense of belonging, that's what we do. We are one of those trees that are also being part of the forest and helping to ensure opportunities for all. So we recently, following the 2017 report in October, we recently went out and said we needed to rebuild our inclusive and welcoming committee for our area. And so through some strategic work and external consultants, numerous stakeholder meetings were held with all sectors of community. And when I say all, there was no one that was left out, that we tried to ensure we touched everyone. And when we reached out to these individuals and having conversations with them, we asked them, what does inclusion look like? Well, inclusion, they brought down to 5 words. So, community, right in the very middle. Representation, again. Welcoming, where's the welcoming? I know it's in there. Right there, it's on the side. Together. And also accessibility with no barriers. So that's what inclusion means to the people, the citizens. That's their voice. So then we also ask them is, tell us what it feels like. Again, now, what does it feel like to you and I, to them? What they expressed, again, belonging, welcoming, friendly, safe. Do you see the threads? Do you see the threads with where I started on statistically? And again, coming into the ground level of our communities. So this is our opportunity to listen to these words and to reflect on those words and to be powerhouses, to look at ways in our community we can strengthen and ensure we listen to these words. There's an organization that many of you have probably heard of, and it's called Inclusion Alberta. And it's an organization that is a not-for-profit, and their focus is to ensure that individuals with disabilities have opportunities for employment and opportunities for living, opportunities to be healthy. And so they align individuals with workplace placements. And so recently they have developed a relationship with our municipality, and as a result, we have individuals that now have a stronger sense of belonging. They do have disabilities, but they feel included within the environment of our municipality. So they're empowered. They feel amazing. And I sit on this committee, and it's absolutely phenomenal to watch and to listen and to see the results. If you follow Dave Mowat from ATB and also WestJet, they do some amazing work as well with Inclusion Alberta. What a great opportunity for all of us. I'd like to introduce you to Michelle. Michelle is a community RCMP officer in Grand Prairie. Raised in the East, and right from high school said, I am going to be an RCMP officer. Well, her dream was squashed because her guidance counselor said, you don't have enough experience. So no, we don't encourage you to go to the RCMP. So instead she went into recreational parks and rec. So she developed her career in recreation, but she always played rugby, and rugby was really important to her. So she went into and got her first degree. Then she decided to go into finance, and she kind of floated. And then one day she said, you know what, my dream was to go into the RCMP, I'm going to do it. She applied, was accepted. She's been in Grand Prairie for a few years, and what's really exciting about Michelle is that being a rugby player, she decided that she was going to join the local team, but also as well that she wanted to find a way to inspire youth to give back and be part of rugby as well. So she got connected with one of our high schools. They had no rugby team. There was no presence of any sort. And she started to have a conversation. You want to play rugby? Nobody knew what it really was of the girls' environment. But she built a team. 6 a.m., can you imagine? Girls, high school girls, think about hair makeup time. That's a big piece. They're on the field, and Michelle's on the field with them. And she's teaching them how to play rugby. I give you that story, and I'm going to give you a testimonial from her in a minute, because one of the other pieces that we've heard numerous times from our youth and our young people, they are scared of uniforms. Because uniforms is authority. So if we can help to bridge the gap between uniforms and our youth, what a great opportunity. And that's what she's done. So she now coaches with her uniform, without her uniform. The kids know she's a mom and that she's there to be their friend. But again, her testimonial is, sometimes my practices land on a day when I'm working. So I show up to coach in my police uniform. It's really valuable for the girls to see me, not just my role as a coach, but as a police officer and a mom. And to know that in any of these roles, I really want what's the best for them. I love it when the girls think they can't play and they get out on the field, but then all of a sudden they see how strong they really are. She just loves it, and she says, when I've seen a small girl get off the field and say in amazement, I just tackled the largest girl on the field. Can you imagine how Michelle feels? But also imagine how those girls feel. When she was in high school, she was told she'd never be an RCMP officer. She didn't have the experience, and she is today. And look what she's doing with her passion and her profession. I want to share with you a little story, too, as well, around immunization and a success story from our community. Over the years, our immunization rates were reporting low in our community. So in 2014, we partnered with Alberta Health Services, and we added some additional questions to our survey. And it focused around immunization. Do you know where to access immunization? Do you immunize? And what we found with the results, there was a very strong correlation between the sense of belonging and immunization rates. When people felt a lower sense of belonging, their immunization rates were lower. So we wanted to dive deeper into that. What did that mean? What does this look like? So what we found is that, first off, people didn't know where to go. They didn't know where the health unit was. It is kind of hidden in our community, not the best signage, And so we recognized that was a first piece, is we needed to increase our signage. But we also recognized it was a two-way street. So it's not just about, here, people come to us. Remember what I said earlier? Sense of belonging is also the two-way street, how we welcome people and how we feel. Well, we knew we needed to get out. So Alberta Health Services now gets out into the community, and they're at festivals and events and at schools and at some of our youth drop-in centers, etc., to connect with the families and give them information so they can make informed decisions based on what they have. So what they've done is they've increased now immunization rates. We were slightly going up. We still have a ways to go. But they're also, in turn, they're connecting and building a bond and that relationship. So imagine immigrants coming to a community and not knowing where the health unit is, or maybe not familiar with the process of immunization and opportunities. They've tried to bridge that, and we're seeing results. And again, it was recognized, the low sense of belonging with those individuals. So we took that situation and we're looking for ways to improve, to provide the best for communities. Recreation. Another success story to share with you from our community as well is that, again, Parks and Rec became, and areas people collect were one of the top items for our community citizens. We also, in our prior reports, in 2011, we reported the highest self-diagnosed obesity rates in Northern Alberta was in Grande Prairie. And so getting people active is really important. Getting people active in their community neighborhood areas, on parks, in events, etc. So the city of Grande Prairie in 2015, but they decided that we needed to expand upon just the regular arenas and ice rinks that were set up as mandated in the community, to also now engage our neighborhood associations and our neighborhood communities to also take ownership of rinks. So they, in turn, have provided all the technical pieces the city has to our community groups, and water's donated. And what's asked of the community is that you have 5 volunteers that maintain it and volunteer to help to build it. And in turn, we have now, in this year, 26 additional rinks in our community. For a community of our size, of 68,000 people, that's in addition to all the other rinks that are mandated by the municipality. So it's, again, thinking differently, engaging in the community. And what I love is look at the different, the different jerseys. Look at the people. This is right out of by our neighborhood. Isn't that tremendous? And Storm, this is our local team. If you ever hear about the Grand Prairie Storm, that's us. Okay. But imagine what that means. So that's recruiting 26, another 130 volunteers that are getting a chance to work together and get to know each other. Another success through the wintertime, which I think is really key as well, is in the past, our parks and recs did not look after our trails in our community in the winter. If you've ever been to Grand Prairie in the winter, guess what? You've got snow here right now. Well, my yard right now, I cannot pile it any higher. 6 feet, and I'm looking up over top of the snowbank right now. We've got a lot of snow. So transportation in the past was always in charge of clearing the trails. And transportation's focus is making sure the roads are open. We need open roads. A lot of us drive four-wheel drives in northern Alberta because we need it for the amount of snow and the weather conditions we live in. So I agree. I want to be able to get access to my office and shopping and etc. Well, a switch in policy, and again, this comes back to where we can influence, a switch in policy moved the trail cleaning from transportation to Parks and Rec. So as a result, in the past, Parks and Recs were doing one little area, which is 23 kilometers in the main core around our Muskosipi Park. But they've now expanded that to include another 20 kilometers. So we have 43 kilometers that are being cleared on snowfall by our Parks and Rec, and it's getting done quickly. So what does that mean? Well, you should see the people walking and taking their puppies and their families for walks, and the interaction. I follow some of the individuals on some of our social media platforms, and I'll see comments like, oh, have they cleared the snow yet? Oh, great. Have you seen, there was, I'm going to use the word cougars because we have real live cougars with big tails. We do. I have one that lives behind my house, I hate to tell you. And we have moose and we have deer, but we talk about that in our communication, and it builds a bond between us. And my disclaimer, I even had a bear on my front yard one day. So, but it's great. We love it. It gives us a sense of what nature is all about. But those trails do that. They bring us together. They create this bond with us. And we also, again, look at our obesity rates. That's the statistical part of it. How can we change that? And how can we keep youth and others interactive and increasing the sense of belonging with them? Now, this next one, many of you may be aware of, but I want to tell you a personal part of this. Are you aware of the program here in Calgary? It's the Calgary Tool Library. A few of you? Yeah. So I recently had an opportunity to meet with one of the volunteers. So those of you that don't know what it is, it's a community-driven initiative where tools are donated to this, like a library toolbox, and people in the area have the opportunity to sign them out and utilize them. So what's happening in that community is we're seeing an increase in the care of their yards. We're seeing gardens being planted. It's just really beautiful what this little organic tool library has created. But the magical part for me was when I was chatting with one of the volunteers who's from this community area. She says to me, I really needed tools, so I decided I was going to go borrow some tools. So when she was borrowing the tools, they said, would you mind to volunteer? We need volunteers because it's a volunteer-driven initiative. She said, sure, I've never volunteered, but yeah, you know what, I'll help. So she started to volunteer, and the biggest thing for her was she said, oh my goodness, I had never volunteered before, but I met my neighbors that live right next door to me. I'd never met them before. So that sense of inclusion and belonging, absolutely amazing. I look at this program, I go, oh, can we have this everywhere? I'd love to see something like this in many communities. Because not only do we then have the opportunity to increase our own homes and our yards, and we take pride, but we have access to those tools to do it, but we also create a stronger sense of belonging within the community. So I really appreciate the direction of this program and others that are similar to it. Mm-hmm. So, big question for you. You're here today, but who else do we need to invite to the table? Who else can help us to look at ways we can increase inclusiveness, increase our sense of belonging. Look organically. Look around your communities. How can you be an advocate? And how can you look for ways to inspire? Because we are all responsible. We're all responsible for our communities. And we have opportunities to share. We have opportunities to collectively partner. I've given you data today. There's tons of data as well in the Vital Signs report, and I've shared with you some examples of some changes that have happened. We're not, any different than you. Our community is your community, and our opportunities to go forward are to look at different ways to inspire, engage, and include everyone in our community. Everyone has something to offer. And again, you never know what a smile will do. It could change someone's day for the rest, that day, or make an impact for the rest of their lives. So let's work together, because communities are made up of people that care, and let's look at ways that we can be more inclusive. And I say that because we know the stats are there, and support each other. So belonging is, again, a two-way street. And I've given you the resource today of the Vital Signs report that's on the table. But also, a lot of the data I'm talking about came from our national report. Now, this is available online, and it's through Community Foundations of Canada here. I encourage you to grab it. For 3 years, we've been studying belonging. And for 3 years, we've starting to look and dive deeper, delve into the issues, and starting to see change happen. So do access this report. Another report that is also something I think is really important to look at is Vancouver led the sense of belonging in investigating and researching, because Vancouver's built a variety of communities as well. So I encourage you to also pull out online their Connect and Engage document. It's brand new, just released in the latter part of 17. And what they've done is they're diving deeper and looking at all their different communities and segmented communities and how they branch deeper and strengthen those communities. It's an absolutely mind-blowing report. And our website address is here, and I'm available for questions if we have a few minutes too as well. Do we, Lisa?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your inspiration and comments this morning. My name's Diane Weinches, and I'm a city councillor with the City of Red Deer.
Awesome.
I'm curious about your comments about perception of crime and the reality of crime. Any thoughts in terms of what we might do to mitigate and build community safety and eliminate some of that perception of crime?
Thank you so much for your question, and I appreciate you're here today too as well, because Red Deer, you face similar challenges that we faced in Grand Prairie. So first off, one of the biggest issues that we've approached around the crime perception is getting out and talking and telling the real story. The other piece, though, is building a stronger sense of bonding between neighborhoods. That has been a big piece of it. When people know their neighbors and they happen to see maybe somebody in their neighborhood that shouldn't, maybe they don't know who they are, or a vehicle that's been parked there, they'll address it as a neighborhood and they'll talk about it. So that's one of the pieces, is just really helping to build. But the other piece is also sharing the successes. We really value the opportunity of sharing the successes and showing initiatives that are helping to show that the crime isn't what it is, that isn't what the perception is, pardon me. And so those successes help to build a stronger bond of trust. And then as a result, because we know with trust, we're going to lessen that insecurity and that reactiveness. And so building trust to share your successes, as a municipality, be open, have conversations. One of the things we're doing in Grand Prairie as our Chief Crown Prosecutor is being very open. My disclaimer is he sits on my board of directors, but as a Chief Crown Prosecutor, he's very open about it, and he's meeting with individual groups and having conversations so that people can have that two-way conversation around what's taking place, what is the reality, and how do we help you build security in your community. So we took an approach of, first off, we know that online is our first choice for a majority of population, but there is the segment that do not access online. So for example, we met in during Seniors Week, we went out and met with our seniors and sat with iPads and helped and said, would you like to complete this survey? We also met and had volunteers that hung out at our recreational facilities so that to ensure that we could have the diversity from individuals utilizing those services. And we also engaged our school divisions, because we know the school divisions are encompassed of a variety of populations and cultures and demographics. And through our school divisions, they also had it as a class project. And that was ideal, absolutely ideal, because also when the kids talked about they did it at school, then we also were able to get the parents to do it as well. So we tried to be on the ground as much as possible. Within our tourism facility, a lot of our locals utilize our tourism facility, having it available there too as well. So there was hard copies, which became quite lengthy, that we had available, but also getting out on the ground and to ensure. One of the things that we recently had a conversation with some of our homeless population, and they said to me, we wish we could have participated. And I said, well, you had the chance. They said, yeah, but we didn't, because we didn't think we were worthy to participate. That hit me really hard. Yeah. So how do we engage them and include them to show that they are extremely important to us? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. There was another question, I think it was at this table, or, okay. Deb? Yeah. Yeah, good question. Somebody said to me that when they go into a community, they find it cliquey. You know, we find the same 10 people volunteering. We find maybe that cliquey, you know, as I mentioned with the RCMP. So I want to give you an example of something that Toronto ventured into that I just think is absolutely phenomenal. Again, Toronto is built of numerous communities within the city, of cultural, demographics, etc. So they recruited the City of Toronto and the Toronto Community Foundation and numerous other partners. They recruited people in uniform. And those people in uniform on a Friday night would go knock on the doors and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I am going to be playing soccer tomorrow at the field across the street. Why don't you come play with us tomorrow? And, oh, by the way, we're going to have a community barbecue. Come and have a hot dog or a hamburger with us. The purpose is to, first off, break barriers. Second is to extend the invitation to come and be part of something. And the third was to look at ways they could interactively be doing something together to lessen those barriers. Now, the last conversation I had with my colleagues, so this is a few years back, the results were baby steps of building. Baby steps because it was hard to get people to come at the onset, but then they started to fill. And I saw pictures of fields that were full. So those individuals in uniform, some would play in uniform, some would not. Some would just get into their regular workout clothes, but they all celebrated together. And I think that's a big piece for us, is as we celebrate, we build trust. We celebrate, it can be those small little milestones, but that trust gets built, that respect gets built, and then next time, yeah, I'm going to want to connect with that individual and be part of it. Okay. You know, that's a really good question, and my challenge is policies sometimes stop us. Yeah. And so even when I mentioned the community garden, it's our first relationship with our municipality and our school division, and this is an inner city school where this garden's being built. And many of the kids that are in that school don't have breakfast. And so a statistic just to share with you around that, when a child has breakfast, more than the percentage of graduation is 78%. If they don't have breakfast, that drops to 61%. So those type of environments, I can't say if we're starting to see more. I'd like to see more. There's a shift to see more of looking at more collective uniform opportunities for communities. But we need to be a voice, because that's what, I'm going to be really honest. I'm, being from the area, I really valued driving into this area today. And I said this to Lisa and Marissa. I felt really welcome when I came into this area. So the planning in this area showed me that, you know what, this is a community that gets to know each other. It felt powerful. I travel a lot, I speak a lot. I don't feel that in a lot of places to the extent that I felt here. And so, you know, we as citizens also build that. Cities build it, municipalities build it through their development offices, but we breed upon it and we build upon it too as well. So to your question, I can't give you more, you know, movement if it's happening, but I encourage us to keep talking and to advocate and look at ways we can change policy. Mm-hmm. I like to talk, Lisa.
That's great. Those are some wonderful questions. Well, Tracey, I want to thank you so very much for that very informative and very valuable presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.